this whole conversation is built around a request for untimed breaks in RTA runs. What a untimed break means, for example, if I am in the middle of a speed run and I just want to take a second to refocus myself, right? Like readjust my grip or just like take a second to breathe, I can do that just fine, right? But the timer keeps ticking because it's a real-time run. What an untimed break is giving someone at some predetermined point, usually like anywhere from like 60 seconds to like a full 5 minutes to like stretch, recuperate, chill out for a second before they get back into it.
Dick is too big.
I wouldn't go that far.
So true, Kim.
You say my dick is too big, and then you tilt the camera, and I'm like, do not show me your dick right now. Do not show me your weenor right now.
Don't do that,
Can
bro.
you see my dick? Can you see my dick? Can you see my dick? Can you see?
Oh, Jesus.
We're so bad.
Christ, dude.
It's just like a good
You know
old
what, fuck it, we're
days.
gonna start the
Especially
podcast
one
like
already.
that. Even though nobody asked, we delivered. And Cole delivered something else. I don't know what he's delivering, but
Yeah,
welcome
his
back
dick
to the podcast,
on prime
everyone.
time.
Well, I wasn't gonna say all that, but my name is Nestani.
I am Jaxler.
My name is DECosmic.
And I'm Coley.
Did you fuck my wife? Did you? Okay.
Do you fuck my
And speaking of fucking other people's wives, Mang0.
Shit.
Good segue. Yeah, I guess we can tee this
Rough.
up. So I feel
So
like
rough.
we have to kind of address this because if you all don't know, which everyone knows if you watch this podcast, that I am #1 Mang0 fan, or I guess some would say was. But we're gonna briefly cover the drama because I don't think there's too much nuance or talking to be done here. But just for the people that don't know what happened, so Ludwig ran a Beerio Kart event, which if you do not know what Beerio Kart is, it's a game him and Mang0 have been doing for years, like 7-8 years, where like you basically, I think the rules are roughly like you do a Mario Kart race, you have to chug a beer at the start of the race, and then you have to chug a beer at the end of the race, and whoever wins, like, and the timer is dependent on like whoever chugs the beer, whoever finishes first, which includes both beers, right? So
Right,
beer at
okay.
the beginning, the race, and the end. So like you could theoretically win the race, but then the person finishes after you and then chugs the beer faster than you, and then they win, right?
Yeah. So
This doesn't
inherently,
really
Mang0
matter.
has an advantage.
This doesn't
here.
really
Yeah.
matter, but that's just how the game works. I just want to tee that up because it's kind of important to explain why everyone was like blackout drunk at this event.
Yeah.
So basically, he runs this event with a bunch of streamers, and so everyone's just kind of like drunk, right? This is an important thing to note, is that basically everyone's drunk, and Mang0 gets basically blackout drunk. It's pretty safe to say he gets like super blackout drunk, which does not not exude what's the word I'm looking
Honestly,
for?
if anything,
excuse.
It does
not excuse.
Well, I was gonna say, if anything, like drinking just removes any inhibitions.
That is
you
what
might have
I was
had.
also going
Because
to
it
get at
actually.
later on.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So basically what happens
Jarvis,
is that,
remove my inhibitors.
to the super TLDR, Mang0 gets super blackout drunk, and then he goes up behind people and he air humps them. Now, not too big of an issue if it's another dude, even though it kind of is, but let's just be real. If he was doing that to the guys, no one would have cared. But unfortunately for him, he was doing it to primarily Emily. Like Emily was like a multiple offender on this. Like I don't know why
Oh,
it
wow.
was
I
extra
didn't know
Emily that
that.
he did this to the most often. But it was also Maya and Senna as well. Of the clips that I've saw, there might be more clips, but there's a lot of clips on it. And I just want to also say that it's not like, oh, this is like a one clip thing. There are at least 5. I watched 5.
Yeah.
Completely different things. And so basically
From this one event, right?
From this one
Yeah.
event. So he would basically walk behind them. He would air hump the air, like pretending that he's fucking their face or fucking their, whatever the fuck. Right. Not
Jesus.
cool. And then he's also like, spreading his legs, like, being sexy. Basically like just straight up sexually harassing them. Right. Let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And so needless to say, I'm kind of glad that he did this like yesterday or 2 days ago, because my 6-month sub renews on the 27th, a day before this podcast releases. And we're recording this on the 24th. So it's good that he did this so that I could cancel my sub and not have given him
save you
6 months.
$5.99.
Yeah, well, no, I pay for 6 months at a time. That's the whole thing, is that I pay a 6-month sub because I want the discount.
Okay.
Because I'm always subscribed to him, and so I only get to cancel every 6 months. So it's almost a good thing that it happened here, so I could cancel my sub. Anyway, so yeah. Needless to say, I'm not really a Mang0 supporter anymore, in case anyone wants to know. I don't know. I just kind of felt like I had to address it because it's just like, because unfortunately for Mang0, I just have a zero tolerance for sexual harassment. I know, kind of
a crazy standard, by the way. Crazy standard.
But also, I kind of
bare minimum king.
Bare minimum. But also, I kind of just wanted to bring up like a topic that I think we've talked about before. I know I've talked about it with Jax, but just like whenever you're watching a streamer, I think people need to realize that like they are just a stranger and you do not know them like at all, right? And you don't need to give them second or third chances, and you don't need to like defend them, right? Like, because the way I view streamers is that they are just a content piece. Like, I watch Mang0 because he's good at pushing his buttons in Melee and because he's funny, right? If anything, it's a clean cut for me. Like, it's very easy. Like, it's a very easy clean cut where I'm like, oh, okay, bye. That's just another person that I just like throw in the trash can, right? Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, not to say that he's going to be there forever. He probably will be. I'm not a very forgiving person. But, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, like, at the end of the day, do I think he's a terrible person? No, but also, like, I don't need to care if he's a good or a terrible person. I just don't want to give him money anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Because
he's proven he doesn't deserve it.
Exactly. Yeah. Talk about your fucking Neopets shit. All right. Hey, guys, I'll see you all at the end of the podcast. Me and Cole, we're going to take a step out. We're going to have a good time. Yeah. This is now a duo cast between Jaxler and Delaware Cosmic the First. Not to be confused with Jaxler the First and Delaware Cosmic.
Well, if you have questions or you might have opinions on, because like Neopets is going to be the jumping off point, but this might just be a more broad conversation about the sport of speedrunning, or like the practice of it, right? Yeah, it looks like our friends are falling asleep here, but all right.
Ouch, honestly.
Yeah, understandable. I know what I set myself up for. But I want to preface this whole conversation with a couple of things. I'm going to be talking about some sort of leaderboard discussion / drama that happened within the Neopets the Darkest Fairy speedrunning community. And the reason I bring it up in the first place is because I think it might give us some interesting things to talk about. Like I said, in terms of understanding what speedrunning is, what it means to people, right? And so because of that, I want to be very clear. First of all, don't go into the Neopets server maybe right now, or like try to speak your piece into this thread. I don't want anyone in the community to feel like they're attacked or we're bringing any kind of unwanted outside smoke into this, right? I also want to be very clear. Again, we're going to keep names anonymous, obviously, but like, don't harass anybody either. Like, I know besides that sounds Jax. Like, yeah, you can harass me. I can take confrontation. But you'll understand that joke in a few minutes. But
oh boy,
the thing of it is that like the point of this is to like spawn discussion, kind of talk about my own perspective in speedrunning, and like a very interesting conversation that like doesn't have a lot of great precedent, and we'll get into why. But let's just start off with what a runner or two we're asking for in the community and what that exactly means. So this whole conversation is built around a request for untimed breaks in RTA runs. And so what a untimed break means is, there's, for example, if I am in the middle of a speed run and I just want to take a second to refocus myself, right? Like readjust my grip, or just like take a second to breathe, I can do that just fine, right? But the timer keeps ticking because it's a real-time run, right? And so what an untimed break is giving someone at some predetermined point, usually like anywhere from like 60 seconds to like a full 5 minutes to like stretch, recuperate, chill out for a second before they get back into it. Right? That's what an untimed break is for the bounds of this conversation that we're having, right? And so, you know, I to keep a spade, there has been one runner who has been very vocal about wanting untimed breaks to be allowed for these RTA runs, which our community has had a history of just focusing on RTA speedruns, right? And so that's what this conversation has been about, right? And so this person's arguments for these untimed breaks has been, you know, here are some other communities that have done this in the past. I have specific, and other people have specific health problems that are preventing them from doing this right now, or this is a limiting factor for people being able to participate in the speedrunning community. And then also, you know, like citing a bunch of other examples, right? So it's coming at this from like an accessibility and like health standpoint, right? And so, sorry, I'm like trying to keep track of a billion different, because I can go in like so many different directions here, right?
Yeah.
But that's essentially where the conversation started. There's this thread that was made in the Discord to discuss, you know, what people thought about that, what that might look like if people were on board. And it has been a bit, to say it has been a fucking nightmare for me is an understatement. Because if you've had any experience in the speedrunning community, you would know that leaderboard rules discourse is one of the worst conversations in human history. Like, it's just bad. It's awful. Nobody likes it. It's not fun. Oh God. Oops. But a lot of people had like varying different perspectives on like untimed breaks, right? So some people were kind of like, oh, this sounds interesting. Like the vast majority of people were like, oh, I don't, you either don't know what to make of this, or I'm interested in hearing you out, but I want to hear what other people have to say, because
most people didn't have an opinion.
Exactly.
Because that's how
most people. Yep. You're good. No, you're good. You're good.
Jeez.
But caught. But you know, a lot of people were just amenable to hearing other people out, wanted to test the waters, right? For another big piece of context to keep in mind, and again, I'm not naming names, but I would argue that outside of a couple of people in the Neopet scene, a vast majority of people in the Neopet speedrunning community really don't have a lot of broad speedrunning experience. And I'm trying to be careful with how I put that, because I know it can come off as pretty elitist, whereas like, oh, I know more than you because I've been around the block for longer.
Welcome to the elitist podcast,
and that's,
ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. And that's
we're better
what
than
I
you.
have been boiled down to in this past weekend. Don't get me wrong. It's what happens anyway. Whenever you bring up, you know, here's what I've observed over my years, but like, you know,
ETNA now stands for elitists, though nobody asked.
True.
Banger rebrand.
Rebrand.
Yeah, God, where was I going with this? Basically, I'm trying to say that especially a lot of like the main people are, I'm going to be real, it's mostly just one person who is like really dying on this hill right now. And they're like, anyone who has been kind of in agreement in that lane at all has been someone who hasn't been around the speedrunning community that much and doesn't have a broader perspective on what speedrunning looks like, right? So when examples from this person arguing in favor of untimed breaks brought up other communities that use untimed breaks, it became, for me, a bit frustrating because there is a large bit of nuance as to why certain communities allow untimed breaks in the first place, because it is something that is allowed by certain communities in certain circumstances. Probably the most well-known example is for longer runs. So I'm talking stuff like nuance. Yeah, I know you know. Don't worry about it. We'll explain when you're older.
They call him nuance, Stani.
Yeah, people have been saying it.
So the first big reason why untimed breaks might be allowed is for longer runs, usually in the range of 4 to 5 hours and longer, right? And that's because people gotta fucking piss. Like, that's just, you know, and a lot of what a leaderboard's rules are designed to do is to celebrate and reward developing specific types of skills. And for a lot of these longer runs, if you don't, you're kind of just rewarding the people who can hold it in longer than others. And some people physically can't. I am one of those people who physically can't because of my diabetes, right? To me, that is a reasonable argument in favor of that. The problem is that the Neopets run is like 30 to 40 minutes, and all bosses is typically under 90. You know, and I said this multiple times over this weekend. I was like, you know, Hundo, I understand the argument because it's like a 3-hour long speed run.
Yeah.
You know, at the higher ends of play. And that can be rough for a lot of people. And there's no like cutscene where you can go and take a bathroom during an unskippable cutscene break, right? Yeah, so it's like that I get. And I was like, hey, I'm amenable to that. Let's talk about this as a separate thing, right? Because this is a different reason why you want an untimed break versus any percent in all bosses, right?
Can I jump in with a question?
Go ahead.
I guess I'm still for what is the argument for the breaks in categories like across the board? Like, I guess I'm still kind of confused.
Yeah, the argument,
or does it just vary from person to person?
The argument, the central argument right now is hand and wrist health and preventing injuries. The argument is that Neopets: The Darkest Fury is a physically strenuous game with some of its tech and glitches and stuff like that. And so as a result, implementing breaks would give people the opportunity to have more, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but have more options in their toolkit to be able to manage their health and play safely.
Okay.
Right?
What can you, because I'm not familiar with the speedrun, like, can you give an example of a trick of like how vigorous it can be?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's not very vigorous.
It's not. So at most,
that's the flaw. That's the core flaw.
That is the fatal flaw.
Okay.
And
I just want to make everything clear.
But you can't say that because if you say that, you're making fun of people with disability.
At most, you're holding specific button combos in kind of a weird way, momentarily.
Oh, clawing them. Yeah.
Like the basic ledge fly is circle back X.
Yeah.
Mega jumps are like circle, like these two buttons, forward, jump, select. Which with claw grip really isn't that bad. It just fucking damn it.
Good shit.
Yes, auto tracking. Let's go.
Hey, let me see if I can fix it.
We're so back, dude.
Please.
Well, now you stopped it, but now it's just like off center.
I fixed it.
Now it's annoying me.
All right, I fixed it.
Oh, you didn't really. But
but it's nothing like button mashing or like or holding down.
And,
There's
and
no
here,
holding down a button
clip,
for a
and
long
we're not
time.
talking about frights.
Yes,
is
the only
physically
and as someone who has dealt with wrist issues before and has played this game for like 7 years as a speedrunner, the only thing that has remotely given me issues with this game is the money duping glitch, because you are kind of tapping through dialogue a bit. But that's mostly because of a technique deficiency on my end, where I needed to adjust. Exactly, it was a skill issue, which I know is being glib, you know, and a lot of people, you know, a lot of times people will be like, oh, you're just like telling me my disability isn't real. No, that's not what I'm fucking saying. It's just, you know,
apparently
anyway.
That's what I said, though, so.
Yeah. But like literally, like Neopets has a text skip glitch that for most cases makes you not have to match through text in the game.
Interesting.
So like
you
it's
basically literally just hold like up and square going into like thing, like you just jump to
and it works.
Sick.
So like as far as PlayStation, exactly. As far as PlayStation speedrunning goes, I would argue Neopets is probably one of the most accessible games on the console for speedrunning.
I would agree with that.
It's up there. It's up there.
I learned it in 12 hours.
I wouldn't say it's the most. I mean, Stuart is fucking free, but like, you know.
Honestly, I think one of the easiest ones probably too is like Gungrave.
Yeah.
Honestly. Because Gungrave has a built-in turbo mode where you don't need to mash the square button to shoot. You literally just hold that shit
the button.
down.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
So all of it is just
to
positioning.
TLDR, like both arguments before Cole like jumps off. Basically,
Yeah.
a person who propositioned the argument was like, "Hey, I want untimed breaks because accessibility issues, right?
And I can't run all bosses
And
if I
then-
don't have breaks.
Yeah. And then the other half, the other thing is, well, untimed breaks and like shorter categories kind of breaks the rhythm and it breaks competitive integrity, which is like kind of where I came at it from personally.
Yeah, and we can go into that more in a second.
Because whenever you are in a run, like part of the skill of speedrunning is doing everything back to back with no breaks, right? Because as you progress through a run, your nerves get higher and higher and higher, and there's more potential for mistakes and other things of that nature, right? And so there's that argument. And then there's...
Yeah, because taking a break dissolves that completely.
Yeah, because then you can just take a break and calm your nerves, right? You could take deep breaths or whatever, and then now you don't have to deal with that, and you can have a better run than you otherwise would have, right? And then basically Jess has some other reasons that he's about to go into, but yeah, there's kind of just like the TLDR of just like... Also, it's a shorter category. Like breaks and speedrunning are typically used for very long things.
You just shouldn't need a break for a category that short. I'm just going to be so real.
Yeah. But we hate people with disabilities if we say that. So we can't say that sentence. So you're going to have to walk that one back.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, Cole, you looked like you had a question, though. So I want to give you an opportunity
How
to ask.
long is like any percent? Like
so 80% is like
40 minutes?
Half an hour.
minutes. Yeah.
40 minutes-ish on... less than 40 on console.
For a regular human, it's about 40 minutes. For Jaxler, it's 30. For regular humans, like 40 to 50. And then, like, all bosses is like 90-ish. So, like, an hour and a half. It's like...
Okay.
I mean, your first
a
run.
little less. Yeah, a little less. It's like...
Maybe two if you're
60 to 90. So, like, an hour to an hour and a half. And then Hundo, which is the one where both me and Jack said we would be fine, like, putting a break in that, is, like, I think 3 hours, 4 hours?
3 hours, yes.
It's 3 hours.
3 hours.
So... That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing basically with 40, an hour and 20, and 3 hours. And the core thing is that they're saying that I want breaks in all categories. And we said, well, how about not 80% and all bosses? How about just Hundo? And then he said, no, I want them for all. And then we said, well, okay, but like... we'll give you the Hundo one if you just want to take that. No, and that's kind of what this is devolved into.
Yeah, and it's devolved into we tried compromises as well too, and those haven't been good enough.
Yeah, but unfortunately, when people don't, never mind.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
well, I have more questions, but I'll let you continue to explain things more because I think it may answer some questions that I already.
Yeah, I guess kind of what I wanted to do next is, in addition to yes and what Nestani said, just a couple other reasons why breaks don't really make sense for what we're doing. The big thing I want to get across is like what RTA means. It stands for real-time attack, which just means a real-time speedrun with no breaks. That is just part of the inherent definition of an RTA speedrun. And our leaderboards were founded as RTA leaderboard pages.
Yep.
And so this is kind of a part of speedrun history that kind of gets missed nowadays because there were kind of two divergent paths. One did real-time runs and the other was toward tool-assisted speedruns. But there's kind of like a secret third thing that are called segmented speedruns, which are done mostly real-time by a human being, but you're allowed to record it in breaks and try to perfect it, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so fundamentally introducing breaks into a speedrun turns it into a segmented speedrun. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to do segmented speedruns, but the problem is you're asking everyone who wants to play RTA and loves RTA to all of a sudden force them to play segmented. And you can argue like, oh, you don't have to take the breaks if you don't want to, but it creates this really awful 50-50 where you're kind of incentivized to take the break because it gives you an advantage, right? And not everyone can also afford to take that break because it makes every attempt that much longer. Because if every attempt that gets to that point is able to take that break, that's another 5 minutes you're adding to every attempt. And that's going to inherently favor competitors who have more time to spend grinding, regardless of their, like, controlling for their level of skill, right? And so there's an it's essentially a fairness problem at that point too. And if you take the break and then you lose your run right after, it's like the worst fucking feeling thing in the goddamn planet. As someone who has run games like GB Robo, where you have a long cutscene that you have to sit through right before a run-killing trick or a run-killing 50-50, right? But that's an emergent property of the game, right?
Yeah.
Neopets is not like that. So basically what gets a lot of people, even including me, upset is this insistence on no, the breaks need to be in on this leaderboard. And if you say anything else, honestly, you're kind of just a bad person because you won't accept what my disability needs are. And if we really want to play the disability card, I hate to be that toxic asshole, but if anyone has it the worst,
has a disability
it's me.
too. Yippee!
Yay.
Literally, I have to learn a skill that no one else has to, which is learning how to manage diabetes during a speed run. Okay? If anyone would, in theory, want the break the most, should be me. Right? But no.
Yeah, I think I've lost count of the times that like I just hear your insulin pump go beep and you're like halfway through the run and you go, oh god damn it.
And these are I've been having conversations with a lot of people outside this like the Neopets community just for sanity checks and also to make sure I'm not like being an asshole with what I write. And a lot of them are also people with disability. Like one of my friends, for example, who has Tourette's, and they would like literally when they were running like crash, like toss their controller mid-run because of a tick. But what they did instead was not ask for a rule change. They tied a wrist strap around their wrist, like a Wii remote strap, so that it wouldn't go flying.
That's kind of fire.
It is fire, right? Tech. And so, to me, like the problem too is I try to be like that. It was like, hey, have we exhausted all other options? Like, and here's the other thing too. God, is a 5-minute break really going to push the needle enough for you? If your problem is so bad that you need a 5-minute break and a 30 to 40 minute speed run, I don't think the 5-minute break, especially when that 5-minute break is like a sixth of the total run time for any percent, I don't think it's going to fix your problem. I just
especially
don't.
Once you're on run 2 or 3 or 4, like you know, like I don't know.
Yep.
And part of the argument I was trying to make is it's so much more beneficial what you do mentality wise and what you do between runs, how you take care of yourself, how you take care of your mental, right? And that's the skill that needs to be developed, not this break stuff, right? So, but the thing that's been the most frustrating about this entire conversation is that whenever I try to make arguments like that, or other people try to make arguments like that, there is like this either subliminally or directly this accusation of, you don't believe my illness is real. You aren't taking my situation seriously. I'm not being listened to. And what things have devolved into is essentially, it's been a shouting match a little bit. And I'm partially to blame for this because I kind of lead the community, right? That's just kind of the position I'm in. So I like kind of need to be confrontational here because I made the Discord. I have been verifying all the runs for the past 3 fucking months. Right? So the reason I even bring this up on the podcast is just because it has been affecting me so much personally, because I honestly feel like I've been being gaslit and been like having my words twisted or willfully misinterpreted, and it's just really frustrating. It really doesn't feel good, especially because, you know, sometimes this will happen from people that I considered friends, right? And there's that betrayal aspect a little bit to it. I don't know. But yeah, that's.
I mean, do you have anything to say?
That's the 101. And I think that, like, I mean, first and foremost, what this person needs to understand is that this isn't as simple as I'm asking for another rule. Okay, let's be pretty clear that this isn't just asking for breaks. This is asking for a timing method change at the end of the day, you know. And this doesn't come down to like the benefits necessarily. It comes down to like there's a lot to really like unpack here, right? Because number one, it's a philosophy thing first and foremost. And if 2 people disagree philosophically about something like this, then there's no discussion to be had. Therefore, the rule should probably not be in place if a community cannot agree philosophically on this thing.
Yeah.
The other thing too that people have to understand about something like breaks is that oftentimes breaks from my experience anyway, which I find it very weird that somebody has not been around a lot in the speedrunning community, but wants to use others' experiences to make up for their own lack of experience in experiencing these situations.
Oh, that reminds me of a good point.
the
But go
thing
ahead.
too is that like you okay?
Let me
Nestani?
jump after this if I
good.
can.
I'm good, bro.
Let me jump after this if I
This is
can.
your injected
But go
podcast.
ahead.
I'm just here.
So
Don't look at my face.
that's fair. You're just like your face was very not looking like you for a moment there. But anyway,
I'm
anyway,
just sitting here with my
but-
Paramore t-shirt, you know.
what the thing is great band, yeah. That's what you get when you let your heart win. But anyway, so the thing that the thing that people have to understand, at least in my experience, about things like breaks is that breaks are often collateral as a part of a timing method change. And whether or not it's collateral that people really want or don't is kind of irrelevant. So, for example, in Devil May Cry 4, that run was for a while a little bit longer than like, it was like an hour, probably like an hour 20 RTA or something, or hour 10. If you were bad like me, it's like an hour 20. But for now, it's like under an hour RTA. But I will get to that. So in that game, we implemented a load remover because there is a high load discrepancy for that game. And I suggested just having the timer pause on the pause menu. Mostly because like skipping cutscenes in that game often leads to you like accidentally pausing the game and then losing 2 seconds, and I also thought like, oh well, if this was kind of like just me going, oh well, we might as well just pause like here. Have this in there, because the way that we had to, number one, the way that we had to code the load remover at the time actually timed out the results screens. Because of the way that the addresses in the games work, for like accessing its memory. Later on, we actually figured out a way to, and we say I didn't have anything to do with this. The people making the load remover actually found a way to get the load removing time, like the results time, but we rolled with it for so long, and there's so much time timed out anyway that we just never implemented it. But because the results screens were going to be timed out anyway, and if somebody wasn't running with cam, there was really no way to like, if somebody just sat at the loads, like the results screen for a little while, it's just like, how do you verify that they're actually like not taking a break or something? Unless they're sitting there for like 5 minutes, Yeah. So I just said, okay, well, whatever. At least if we have it paused during, the start menu or whatever, then that's fine, because, then people will just be able to be like, hey, I'll just go and take a bathroom break. And as long as somebody doesn't abuse it, that's fine. I actually got a PB during one of my runs because I was able to go and take a bathroom break. But then I beat that because I didn't feel right about my RTA being so bad. The thing that is the reason that we kept this in actually is because later on there were skips found in the game that revolved around causing the game to lag by forcing it into windowed mode. Now, what this does is that it creates a visual bug in live split. So after runners perform the trick, the timer is bugged like visually, and it's running actually like on their computer, but in OBS it's still. So we required runners to pause the game and get the timer running again on screen, like basically by just like clicking it or whatever, like refreshing the source or whatever, and then unpausing and then continuing with the run. And that made it a lot easier to verify runs that way. Now, again, these breaks are still in because of a collateral of something like that. Yeah. In the cases of Resident Evil runs, it's a lot more dire, I think, because that community is much more accepting of things like breaks and pausing the timer, like pausing the game and squeezing out like every second. Like, so in Village, for example, on the elevators, people will like mash escape, waiting for the first frame of that like autosave to pop up, and then hitting restart and then like saving time from that, because instead of just like letting the elevator carry them up. To me, that's like, there's just such a commonly accepted thing now with PC speedrunning where you generate more loads to save time because of the way that loadless timers often work. And as a result, these things like breaks get put in anyway because people go, oh, well, the timer's paused anyway. So,
and this was part of my argument for why I think comparing across different, especially PC runs, Well, first of all, like more than like 70% of the examples this person used were runs that were in like the 6 to 7 hour range, and we were already like fine with the Honda discussion. So like you just throw that out anyway, right? But the two examples that got brought up in particular were Hades and Death's Door. And I would need to like go back and check exactly what I wrote.
And I'm only vaguely familiar with Hades, to be honest. But something I will tell you about Hades, I don't know if they still time this way, but I think that they time by the IGT in the game.
It depends. They do RTA stuff, but their thing is like for multi-weapon runs. So like you do it's a roguelike. So you do multiple runs to the boss with multiple weapons, right?
Yep.
And so they allow for like breaks between the weapons. But I think that's more of a consequence of the way that they can verify runs, right? And then with like Death's Door, for example, I part of me just wants to like go and fact check what I said about that. But a lot of times what happens is you have those load discrepancies between people who are all playing on the exact same build of the game and the hardware. And so if someone has like really slow loads in a game that is done in load removed time, then people who have slower loads actually have a competitive advantage over those with faster ones. So a lot of times, like if you see breaks implemented it's a way of standardizing that so that everyone's on the same playing field, if that makes sense. So to me, you can't really cross compare that with something that's a console run that's RTA. And you know, their thing was like, oh, well, we have console versus emulator, and you know, there's some stuff that we aren't afforded as emulator runners because this person
I will say
really runs.
I will say this too: when it comes to disability, right? In making statements like the advantage is going to be like equal for everybody from breaks, that's just inherently not true. Because myself as an able-bodied person, I am going to be able to spend this break on much more than somebody that's disabled is able to. You know, like for example, Fiery, who's in the DMC1 community, he regularly cannot run that game for a while because of the way that his hands are. So there's times where like he just takes a week off the game and then he comes back here and he can't really play games much at all during that time. And it's not that game that does that either. That's not like a totally strenuous game. It's just his hands are not great for playing games. I don't know what caused it. He hasn't really been open about it. But he in terms of like explaining it, he's been pretty open about like talking about it with other people, which is why I feel comfortable bringing it up here. But what was I going to say? But like, so for example, if we implemented like a break in DMC1, if he spends that 5 minutes ice in his hands, he can't spend the 5 minutes to go to the bathroom that I could, you know, there is, or like, I don't know,
or just
me
spend
going
the time to just like completely just reset and focus up, right? Because he has to focus on his hands,
like
he has to focus
in my
on
case, if I'm taking a break, I'm doing calculus. I'm doing
Yeah.
numbers on my diabetes, right? That
like,
doesn't give
walk
me a
over
mental
here.
reset.
And I could like walk over and just like, I don't know, grab a protein bar and sit there and eat it for like 5 minutes, you know, like there is not like saying applying it equally. Yes, that's correct. But the problem when you're tackling things like accessibility and disability, equality is not really the answer. Equity is, right? Like if we're going to talk about stuff like that, then you have to, if you want to level the playing field, then you need to talk about equity more than equality. Because people that have differing needs need different solutions to these problems. So it's like inherently breaks are not going to level the playing field a ton. Like if anything, I think that able-bodied runners are going to get more out of them than disabled runners are.
Exactly. And so to give you an idea of kind of where
Cole,
I've kind of come. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, go ahead, Cole.
I just wanted to say, because you mentioned that what was the break time period? 5 minutes?
Ish, yeah. And obviously people are willing to like budge on
go down on that.
Like,
Okay, I didn't know if that was like a set in stone thing, or I was wondering where 5 minutes in particular came from.
It was
I
the
often
number
see 5 minutes as like a there's that plus like I see it a lot as a benchmark. I think that in like RE2 remake there is like a 2 minute timer that's like 2 minute time that's allowed. And that's mostly because people like for a while, especially when that game came out, there were people that needed to like lower their graphics settings and lower you know, like, or up their FPS and then lower their graphics in the menu, and then they could actually do the strats. Yeah, it was awful. And because of that, they were actually like, okay, so just so people don't take too long doing this, but we still want you to compete, because even though your computer's like bad and my computer's bad,
can't
like
fucking compete. I just
couldn't
can't
run the game,
compete.
you know? Like, there's that. And then, like, don't even get me started on RE4 Remake, where they just, like, I've seen people pause buffer every headshot in that game because of the way that the timer works.
Yeah.
Like, and that is just collateral, and it's like, unless
There's only
you
so
want
much
to,
you can do. Yeah.
because it's like either they allow this, or they, like, just go by either, like, well, now that the whole game's fucked up, they should have just gone by like LRT, but they go by IGT, and the IGT pauses when you pause the game.
Yep.
So instead of now doing a whole timing change method for a game that has probably like 300 runs at this point, or 400 runs or some bullshit, because it's RE4 and it's one of the best games ever made. It's like,
other thing,
come on, man.
Yeah. The other thing too, and I haven't really brought this up yet, this is more of a selfish argument against this whole breaks thing, is that it's going to become my problem, right? Because as far as modding for the Neopets leaderboards go, I've been the only one verifying runs for the past 3 months. So essentially, this is, if anything, this is asking a lot out of me to manage this. And, you know, this person was like, oh, I'm a leaderboard mod too, so it's like, I'm more than happy to just take over this. And I'm like, that's not the point. You're just putting... And so here's like the compromise that I like tried to bring up is like, okay, let's give you a space on the leaderboard, because segmented runs are different from RTA runs. Let's make a segmented board. So that way you can have a spot to have your runs in, and then other people will be encouraged to join in with you on that. That wasn't good enough for them, because they wanted their way or the highway. I'm just going to say it. They just want their way or the highway. I'm done just dancing around it at this point. So it's like, I don't know, but anywho, I want to make sure, Cole, you can like ask what you wanted to ask, unless
it almost seems like at this point, I mean, unless the whole community's in agreement, and then this particular person who's brought up, like, you know, because it sounds like it's really one person pushing it.
It's really one person dying on the hill, and then other people either being against it or not really caring.
Yeah. In situations like these, it's almost like you need to think about, like, what is I want to choose my words carefully because it kind of matters how I say it. Like, what is the intention of the speed run competitively? Like the speed run leaderboards.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, you know?
Like, what are we trying to test? What are we trying to promote skill-wise?
Yeah, exactly. And that can be something really difficult too. Just because there's so many different angles you could look at it. And each game is, as we've already kind of described here, like, the intent of each speed game competitively is different, because it depends on the game and what tricks are accessible to you, and what other obstacles there could be in the way of, like, doing something RTA or IGT or whatever. But I assume that there hasn't really been that much of a conversations in regards to that, just given off of, like, what has been said already. So,
well,
it's an interesting
fact. That was the whole basis of, like, my statement that I sent, and was about competitive integrity, and, like, basically, like, because basically, I mean, I guess I could pull it up, but basically, like, I said something along the lines of, like you are submitting to a leaderboard, so you are submitting to a competitive place, which means that if we insert this rule, which breaks competitive integrity, it breaks the whole basis of the leaderboard itself. And that's kind of what I was saying. So I was kind of saying what you were saying.
And it's also
I
just
said it better
asking
in my thing. But,
it's asking a lot too, right? It's like one person asking us to change the entire way we've been doing things for like a decade, kind of just for them. If I'm gonna be real, they try to make it out to be like it's, you know, for other people, or other people have expressed this, but honestly, it feels a lot more like them going to them and being like, wouldn't this be a cool idea? And then they're like, yeah, sure, not really fully understanding, or, you know, and honestly, it kind of feels manipulative. I'm going to be real. it's kind of given manipulation for me a little bit. Like one of my friends in that community who, again, I will name, but Nestani will probably know who I'm talking about here, who I actually just hung out with the other day, was like, yeah, you know, I went into this conversation being really like thinking this was a cool idea, but now as I've continued to listen to this conversation, I'm realizing now just how little information I had going into it, right? And that kind of loops back to what I said about a lot of the people who are supporting this are people who, like, if there are more than just this one person in particular, it's that they don't have a lot of experience with the speedrunning community, so they're a lot more pliable in that regard. And that's what is concerning to me a little bit. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult topic to broach, because obviously this doesn't come from it doesn't come from nothing, right? Usually the people that bring these things up have some sort of like personal stake in this. Yeah. And it is tough to kind of draw the line, right? Because speedrunning as a community is incredibly inclusive, and it's for the betterment. Yeah. But it's like, at the end of the day, on like the community versus the leaderboards, I think we need to understand that like these are kind of a separate thing. You know, like nobody's going to think less of you if you're like a good community member, if your run's down further on the board because of issues you may have had like doing the run, right? And expecting like the leaderboard to change so that you could possibly be at the top. I'm not specifically accusing this person of that, but given your you calling it maybe a little bit manipulative, there's a possibility there.
I wouldn't say it's like, from that perspective. I think it's this person really wants this change, and they're going to get it however they can.
So I'll walk it back then. So again, it's like understanding that like the community is different from the leaderboard, even though the community does manage the leaderboard, because a leaderboard has like a standard essentially, right? Where
and it's public facing is the other thing. If there's not a
stricter rule set, then things become too pliable. An example here, I guess, is when Devil May Cry 5 came out. There were like some mechanics that were around in DMC4 that people were like kind of upset got removed. Notably, there was the ability to manipulate momentum in certain directions using a jump cancel. Yeah. And now I think it's fine to say, okay, we feel like the game's simpler, and that's not cool because now we can be less creative with our combos or whatever. But what this kind of led to was a world where everybody was modding the game to like play how they wanted it to play. And there's no standard by which you can really judge combo videos anymore for that game, because everybody's playing a different game now. Yeah. And so like some people are playing at like 120% work rate. Some people are playing at 140% work rate. Some people are playing at 110 or like 110%. Some people have momentum manipulations enabled. Some people don't. Some people have reversals enabled. Some people have visual mods. Some people don't. Yeah. Or some people have additional movesets like latched onto characters for more options. Some people have options sped up to transform quicker. Wow. And it's like, visually, I think that kind of stuff is cool because it really shows how far modding for the RE engine has come. But when it comes to actually judging who is good and who is creative at doing these combo videos, that standard has kind of been lost compared to DMC4, And it's not a one-to-one comparison because that is more of like an abstract sort of competition or more of an indirect competition. And it's not until people actually have like tournaments like the like Cryocore, I think was one, like that was by these guys called Our Combat World. But there just you can't just like widen the what's it called? I don't want to call them gates because that's but it's like you can't just allow anything on the leaderboard, right? I mean, it comes back to like if somebody's doing a fast playthrough, okay, I'll probably let them onto the leaderboard. But if they're just like, oh yeah, this is my first playthrough, and they're like watching cutscenes and they're doing whatever else,
if they're no thanks.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be on there. Even if you beat the game in even if you beat like a 20-hour game in 15 hours, I don't care, bro. Like, you're not clearly like at least doing just a casual, like a fast casual playthrough. If you aren't skipping cutscenes, at least.
Yeah.
But it's like,
here?
then you can make the argument of, well, some people really want to watch the cutscenes during their run because they really enjoy the lore of this game, and they really enjoy engaging with the characters, and doing this during the run would really, really help, like, retention for runners. You can you can rationalize anything. I could rationalize anything if I wanted to.
Oh, we know.
I had to stop rationalizing because it was a huge character flaw for me. But it's like, yeah, there just has to be a cutoff point. And again, we come back to, this is not just asking for a rule on top of what is existing. This is asking for an entire timing method change. This is asking for a philosophy change. Yeah. And like, I don't understand. I don't know if they understand this. I'm not going to presume if they do or do not, because I don't know this person. But there's a lot of variables here that are just kind of like interlocking, and even one like extra variable being inserted that's this big is like very jostling, you know?
Yeah.
It fucks up the oscillation of the whole process. You know, I mean, even something like me introducing the Xbox One X ports of Otogi to those leaderboards, just like, now Ame doesn't just have to like time runs for just the Xbox ports, which are probably roughly the same. Now Ame has to time like loads for a bunch of different ports, you know, or now the standard is going to be, well, if I want to have a much better RTA, it's not going to affect like, it's not going to affect me load wise, because Ame and I actually time out the loads for the respective Otogi games that we moderate. But that is a whole other variable that I introduced that now has pretty much mandated this process to continue.
Yeah.
No matter how big the games grow, because otherwise it's going to be people just got to buy a Series X, and then you end up like Sonic Unleashed. And it's like, even something as simple as like a good quality of life change, because Otogi 2, for like a really good run on the original Xbox, is like an hour and 6 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes. On Xbox One X, I'm like encroaching on sub 50s once I get like an actually good run.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much quality of life in there. And that's just better. That's less time that you have to sit there. That's more like focused, you can say. It makes the run better, I think, because there's less downtime, etc. Even something as simple as buying a new console to play an old game on can change these things drastically.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how much PlayStation 1 leaderboards like would have upended if they were around like when the PS2 came out.
Yeah.
Also, just like another thing too about this like specific like timing thing that has been brought up too, I think like in a lot of games too, like whenever they do have breaks, it's like you take a break at this point of the run, right?
Yeah.
Versus just I want to take a break whenever for however long. And so then then whenever you say that, then it's like, okay, I have this 40-minute run, and then as a mod, you don't know when they're going to take a break. They could take a break at the 5-minute mark for 5 minutes, or they could take a break at the 5-minute mark for 1 minute, and then take a break at the 15-minute mark for another minute, and then take another random minute break else. You know what I mean? And then it's just like nothing is mandated, so they have to scrub through that. They have to carve it out. They have to do all this extra like timing work because it's not, because it's not in the rules to be like that. And I think that's like another like big problem with it, which I think Jax like pretty much teed up at the very beginning, but like
it just creates for me a lot of work for no reason.
It's and then kind of just like the core issue of the whole thing is that like you say something dissenting to this person's opinion, and then they just yell at you that you're ableist basically, and it's just like, okay, I just have a different opinion from you. That doesn't mean that I'm attacking you as a human being. Right. But I think a lot of people just like, I think a lot of people nowadays, whenever you have a different opinion than someone, a lot of people automatically assume you're attacking them because so many people cannot deal with the confrontation, and that is amplified heavily in the speedrun community because for reasons, people in the speedrun community are not very good at confrontation. And it's just the way it is.
Well, I think it's like an overcorrection, right, too, because like there are absolutely people that have like made people feel like less than human, and done so maliciously for, things like having a disability or, having a different sexuality or something like that.
Or
but now we come like
man.
to the other. Nobody's saying that. But like, again, I use the horseshoe metaphor here where it's like, or whatever we do,
I would argue
you strapped in Nestani. Yeah. But now it's an overcorrection where like allies are being lumped in with people that are maliciously and intentionally trying to exclude people just because there needs to be a line to be drawn, and it's like there's no hate there. It's just like how hobbies work sometimes. Like, I'm not going to invite somebody to be in a band if they don't really know how to play an instrument.
Yeah. And I think kind of to what Nestani was saying, like that's emotionally for me, that's what's been bothering me about this whole situation. Yeah. Obviously it's been affecting me because I'm the one who's been, basically everyone's been walking around eggshells because of what Nestani mentioned, just trying to be as charitable as possible and just trying to like, not resort to things like the skill issue argument, which honestly at this point I think is just kind of part of the argument. But
yeah.
Anyway, but like I get so frustrated with I finally understand why Nestani hates people who are afraid of confrontation so much. Because like I really get it now because it becomes like they just get into this state of defensiveness and it's the passive aggressiveness, and there's just been so many like subliminals thrown at me and my friends, and I am just so exhausted with it, frankly. It's just unending. And it, I'm in a tough spot because like half of me just wants to ban this person because of them being like this towards people in our server, but am I going to get labeled a bigot for that? Like, I'm like, because that's my issue too, is we're all fundamentally on the same team, right? We all want we all want what's best for the community. And like a lot of people who you'd think would be like the most stick in the mud traditionalist about this type of stuff are like really the ones extending the olive branch here, right? So it's like,
yeah, because let's be clear, I don't actually think there should be a break in a 3-hour-long speedrun. I think that's also like, I don't know. I think you could, like, I think that is like a limit where you could be like, maybe tantalize me. And if it's that big of an issue, sure, where I can like allow something like that. But me personally, I still would be like, you can do a 3-hour-long speedrun in one sitting. Like, I think that's just kind of fine. Now, hey, maybe I'm being ableist and, maybe I should be thrown in a trash can. But that's just my opinion. But the thing is that like me and Jax are being, well, I'm not going to lump Jax. I am being charitable in the fact that I am saying, okay, well, you can have your break in the 3-hour run, just not in the 40-minute run and the hour and 10-minute run, right? Like those are, like, that's what I'm saying is that like, but the whole problem with this person is that they just ignore that. It's, I want all of this or nothing.
Nothing.
I don't know. Like we've made a compromise with you already, but then they go and they say, you're ignoring everything I'm saying and you're not making a compromise with me and you hate my hands and me personally and my disability.
And it's just like
no, nigga, that's not what we're doing.
It's a complete disregard of what people have been saying. And frankly, I don't understand how you expect people,
man. Like, I don't know.
They're not. And that's what's the most frustrating thing is I feel like, and this is why people like have been getting more and more glib with this person and like why tensions have been rising is we're just not being listened to. And how do you expect people to not be glib with you if for one, you're glib with them, but also you're just ignoring what they say?
Yep.
And like, we are doing everything in our power. Like, the amount of times where I have just sent some of these messages to like Nestani or other of my friends just to like heat check them, or I would type out what I wanted to say in advance and then run it by other people just to make sure I wasn't coming off the wrong way or saying something I didn't mean. But even after peer review, this person still continues to like, it almost feels intentional. Like, I always try to live by the rule of like, don't attribute to malice what can be explained by by sheer stupidity. But it's like, it feels rough. It's just rough, right? And that's.
I think another part of it too is that I feel like this person is doing the classic Twitter thing, as I would like to say, and
it
the
is
classic
a very
speedrunner thing, as I like to say as well, where a lot of people like to go into arguments with the intention of like not actually arguing, if that makes sense. They just go into it and they say, "This is my statement, and if you don't agree with me wholly, kill yourself, and if you do agree or you agree with me." There's no middle ground. There's no like, hey, let's have a back and forth, let's talk about this. Like, they don't actually care to hear your opinion, right? They just want to say, this is my opinion, period. I don't care about anything that you have to say. But they won't say that. But that's how many people go into arguments. And it's like, you have to go into it's like, if you're going to have an argument with someone, you have to go into it with the intention of listening, right? You have to have the intention of listening to the other person, because otherwise it's not an argument. You're just stating your opinion, which again is fine if you just want to state your opinion. But again, if you're bringing up rule changes and stuff, like I remember they said a statement where they're like, I didn't think that this was going to spark this much discussion. And I'm like, you didn't think that changing the entire method of how you time shit on a board for a leaderboard for especially a small community is not gonna hearken a bunch of discourse? And I'll be so real, that message rubbed me the wrong way, because to me it reeks of this like, oh, I didn't expect that I would have to actually argue or anything, or that people wouldn't just roll over for whatever the fuck I wanted. It just came off as entitled. It's entitlement. I did not say that.
Because this is the thing
Jaxler
too, is like
that.
I did say that.
And
I'll live with it.
I think that Nestani brings up a good point here too, is that like, you know, when we had discussions about like allowing turbo in one of the categories for DMC1, you know, that was everybody kind of like just putting our heads together and being like, is this like a net positive, right? Because when you want to open up the floor for these things that can have ramifications on the run, you know, because allowing turbo, for example, for like just a shooting section or whatever, it has implications in a couple of other spots, but you don't really know how something like a hardware change like that can change a run entirely, because it possibly can, you know, especially when it's being used for something related to damage. But I felt like for the most part, everybody that was part of that discussion came into it with like the idea of like, we don't know if we're going to do this or not, but let's at least talk about it. You know, let's at least float the idea. Let's see how people feel. And like 4 people that tried runs of the Dante Must Die mode, they were like, guys, this shit sucks to regular MASH. Like, you know, and we were all like, all right, fair enough, you know. And it allows people to play the category for longer if they're not sitting there mashing on the puppets in that basement. But it had to start with, again, and I come back to like philosophical differences, right? If there are such deep philosophical differences that you can't just open the floor, then the discussion's going to go nowhere at the end of the day. And like, I feel like I've said some pretty crass things already today, even like saying, you know, even bringing up the example of like a band, I feel like is a little crass, but
I can be
at
more
the end of the day,
like,
that'd be great if you could just make me look better. I appreciate it.
I can in an instant.
No, you're good. But
Okay,
basically,
cool.
like at the end of the day, I want people to understand that like, I am always going to hear somebody out in terms of, you know, in terms of like changing a leaderboard, because at the end of the day, like leaderboards are a reflection of the community. And if one person is going to bring it up, then it's worth at least floating the idea within reason. You know, like if they were just like, hey guys, can I just have every world record by 1 second? I'd be like, no, you know, but, the rule is I win, but it's like, no. But
I think a key statement that
there
you just
has
said
to
though
be,
is that you just said that you always hear them out. And I think that's like my core issue with this whole conversation, is that me and Jax did hear this person out, and they just say that we didn't, right? And that's like, if I'm not hearing you out, sure. Like if I'm completely discrediting everything you're saying, and I say that you're a fucking stupid loser, pussy bitch, then like sure, I'm diminishing you. But unfortunately, in this instance, I didn't say that, and I was very respectful, and I did hear them out, and I was like, well, here's my opinion on that, right? But the thing is that like I heard them, but they didn't hear me, and that's kind of like the whole like thing is that like I feel like the whole Neopets community heard their complaints, and we were like, okay, well, we don't think break should be here like in any percent in all bosses, but if you wanted a break in Hundo, we would be willing to grant that, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't hear that. They just said, oh, you said no breaks, and it's like that's not what we said.
Yeah,
actually.
and something too that I've noticed is that like people that were originally quite vocal, like in support of this, when more context and more opinions came to light, that support was not as
quiet.
fervent. You know, it was a little quiet, and
quiet.
I don't think that that's because
There was an
like
update, sorry.
And I don't think that this is like a reflection of like confrontation. I think this is in the cases of those individuals, I think it's them looking at the wider picture and going,
it's them actually
Oh.
reading and listening.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
all
them,
points.
it's them reading and listening. And I think that's an important thing to note for people is that like, because you can present, because this person, I feel like that their initial points, they presented them pretty well, and they did like link some things, and they linked like, you know, precedents and all that sort of good stuff. So before you like, you know, before other perspectives come into the picture, I think just looking at this person's posts, they presented their points quite clear-headed, etc. And so naturally, I feel like most people, especially if they don't have a lot of time in speedrunning and seeing how different leaderboards are
They
run
just
and
say,
everything,
oh yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
because it does make sense, especially with the clear
If you don't
way
have
that
any
this person,
context or
Yeah.
other
Yeah,
arguments
exactly.
to look at.
especially with the way that like and how persuasively this person worded a lot of their posts, you know, because I think that they did do a good job formatting everything. But when other perspectives come in, you know, dissenting or otherwise, when that gets, you know, when you start to see the cracks, you know, essentially, it's like, okay, well, the reasonable thing to do is not to just go, well, I agreed with this person from the start, so I got to find a way to keep staying on their side. It's no, I have to actually really look at this thing again that I took my opinion for granted on at first.
Yeah, and that's what I
So-
did with Mang0 recently.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so sorry. I saw the opportunity.
Jeez. I respect it. Dude, it sucks because mangoes are my favorite fruit too. Well, actually, no, pineapple is now, but it's fine.
Well, don't worry.
Um,
It's not the fruit. It's Mang0 with a 0, so it's not actually the fruit.
Oh,
yeah.
it's Mang0.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah. It's
Oh,
Mang0
okay,
actually.
okay.
Mang
Mang0.
I think-
All right, fair enough. Yeah,
I
Cole,
think,
you have something here?
Sorry if this is possibly a little repetitive.
No, go ahead.
I think one of the best things about speedrunning in general is that it's competitive, but I think one of the worst things about speedrun is that it's competitive.
Yeah.
Because like while
Yeah.
'cause there's a lot of pros for there being something competitive, and it allows for motivation to innovate and to try new things and to like
It's true.
grind down the time more and more and to see how far you can take a speedrun. But then the other side of the aisle is sort of, it attracts people who, and I'm not saying that this person in particular is, but just in general, I've seen in Frights, is that there are some people who, well, I mean, Frights is honestly the only speedrun community I've ever truly been a
Fair
part of
enough,
for the
fair
most
enough.
part.
Yeah.
Like Unmasked hasn't really seen much of this.
Yeah.
Of like people who are competitive, but the thing is that some people, they can only see speedrunning from that competitive side. They can only see it from, because it's like, oh, well, if my name isn't on the leaderboard, then like, what's the point?
If my
Yeah.
name isn't
And
on the
I have
leaderboard, I'm
some
not a
people
speedrunner.
who, if for people who are like not aligned with that in this particular conversation, that's fine. But the problem is that you may unintentionally be coming off as that way, right?
Mhm. True.
And
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
and
I can
just
agree with
like
that.
I thought you were done.
now I lost it.
Fuck. Well, so what I was going to kind of spin off of that is that, like, I think also a core thing of this, and I brought this up, I think multiple times actually, was that, like, to be a speedrunner, you don't have to submit to a leaderboard, right? And I think that's also a thing that's just, like, getting completely glossed over and not, like, talked about at all in the conversation. Because I basically said, like, hey, like, like, hey, if you can't submit to the leaderboard legally, you can still just grind down your own time on your own ham, and then you know, take as many breaks as you want on your own terms, and then you can do something like a segmented run, right? I didn't know the term segmented run at the time when I wrote that message, but, like, you could do a segmented run, and they could make a space on that for the boards, or you can just say fuck the boards, and you can just grind down your time, and you can be like, I'm doing this section of the speedrun, and then you can just stop your timer. You can fucking go to McDonald's. You can get a fucking Oreo McFlurry. You can come back. You can eat that shit, and then you can start your recording again, and then hit your timer, and then you can do your timer like that. Like, you, like, I think what is lost here is that, like, a leaderboard, specifically SRC, a leaderboard is inherently competitive. Like, this is a competitive thing, period. I don't care if you don't take it as you're being competitive. If you, like, there's thousands of runs on Mario 64. If you are 1054, you are 1054 best in the world, right? That's how it goes. You are on the leaderboard. Yep. You submit it to the leaderboard. This is competitive. I don't care how low you are. I don't care how unserious you take it, right? You are in a competitive space, right? And the whole thing about changing the leaderboard for accessibility is that, like, I get it, but also this is competitive, and I think, like, the fundamental timing thing kind of just breaks the competitive vibe
spirit
again,
of it.
Because again, do RTA real-time attack, you do it in one sitting. It's not a segment run. It's a completely different thing. You do it in one sitting. Nerves, all of that. We've all said it, like, multiple times throughout this episode, right? And so it's like you can't just, like, ignore that part and just be like, well, I don't think that's a thing, and I think we should change it anyway. And it's like, well, this is a competitive space, right? Like, if like it, you can speed run a game without being on the leaderboard, right? Like, and you are still just as valid as a speedrunner. Like, I don't have any examples of people that I know that haven't submitted to a leaderboard or whatever, but I guarantee you, if you're in a community, especially a small community, and you play the game and you're like, hey guys, I got this time. I can't do it RTA because of my hands, or, like, because of this or whatever. No one would be like, wow, what a fake run, you fucking stupid idiot. They would be like, oh, cool.
People
nice
will do
run,
that
man.
In the YouTube comments anyway.
Well,
Like,
right,
exactly. But, like,
exactly.
in the community, if you post that, everyone's going to be like, yo, good shit on the run. Like, good shit on the timing. No one's going to be like, oh, your time isn't real. No one's going to say that. You know what I mean? Well, they might say that if you aggressively proposition your time, like, oh, my time's better than you. Then, like, maybe you can open up Pandora's box if you're aggressive about it. But if you're simply just like, this is my time, you know, and you could still enjoy the art of speedrunning by just doing the art of speedrunning, which is just beating a game faster. It's just doing it. You, like, it's just beating a game faster. It's beating your own time. That is the core. That's the core of speedrunning, is just getting better. And if you're getting better, you're doing speedrunning, right? And so it's like, I think there's a disconnect where, like, the leaderboard has to be in this person's brain, and they can't speedrun without the leaderboard. And I think, like,
it's one of those,
like, you can speedrun without a leaderboard. Like, people were speedrunning before SRC existed, bro. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's. I think it's symptomatic of, like, something that we've talked about before, where people are very obsessed with, like, the result rather than, like, liking the process.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So there's that too. I mean, a lesser example too is there's a guy named Chris Link in DMC1 who for a while had too much anxiety to actually stream any runs, so he didn't do anything single segment. But he was working on a Dante Must Die, like, all special bonus. So it was basically like 100% and beyond. You know, this is like an ultimate playthrough essentially.
Giga chat.
He was working on a segmented playthrough of this, and, like, so he'd be posting clips like, you know, saying, oh, hey, I just got this time, like, as part of my segmented run, you know, like, and he was sharing stuff with the rest of the community. And nobody was going like, I don't fucking care about that. That's part of a segmented run. We were like, people were like, oh shit, can we use this in single segment? You know? And, like, collaborating with him and being encouraging to him. Like, you know, I was kind of ribbing him a little bit, like, when are you going to stream, dude? You know, or like, when are you going to actually run like single segment?
Classic
he eventually ended up running and got record for any percent in Dante Must Die, and then he actually did a race with like 3 other runners recently, and on his very first full run of all collectibles for normal, he got record for that. Because he's just really fucking good at the game.
Yeah.
But he grinds offline and he
damn.
grinds ILs all the time, and he just didn't stream due to anxiety and other factors. But like, from being welcomed into the community and people like talking to him and, you know, understanding that he knows his shit, and him sharing everything, like, he finally felt, it seems like at least he finally felt confident enough to step into that space.
And
you know?
to get into more specifically Neopets, that was one of the biggest things that helped the community explode, was the emulator console split. Like, letting people run the game on emulator and having that on the leaderboards was like huge. Like, for example, so many runners that are playing right now play on console now, but started on emulator, or they play both. Because honestly, console versus emulator is kind of almost like 2 different speed games. But that's a whole other. Yeah. For Neopets specifically,
which is given why they split it, right? So
exactly, right? But like, literally, even today, we probably just had one of the most impactful discoveries in this game in a while, which is the death of the Ottoman Ledgefly. So Ottoman Ledgefly is just gone now. Which, if you don't know anything about the Neopets run, that was like
that shit sucks.
the
That's
hardest.
The sisters fight, right?
Yeah, the collapse sequence at the end of Act 1.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's the other Ottoman Ledgefly. We still use that one.
But it's the one where the sisters are shooting at you, right?
Or shooting at you, and it's
you keep
awful.
getting shot off the ledge over and over again, and then you watch Jaxler rage for like 5 minutes, and he just crashes out, and you're like,
well, I've been nailing it lately, but like, here's the thing, though.
You were grinding and you were crashing out anyway.
Here's the crazy thing. I'm just gonna go on a tangent here because this strat is hilarious.
Oh, okay.
Like, if you didn't do that strat, you either did this like mega jump into like a potted vase and then clipped yourself after you wedged yourself in there, or if you didn't do, this is biggest for the no cloak route, where you don't get that magical potato sack, where you would wedge yourself into a table and pray that it would clip you out of bounds. Now all you do is you line up with the wall on the left, like on the side of that side of the wall where the Ottoman is, and you just do a dash attack, and it will clip you partially through the wall enough to put your hitbox into the load zone.
That's funny.
Yeah,
Pretty good.
and it's like that wouldn't have come across if this runner hadn't joined the community, who joined the community through, well, actually, no, I think he did his first All Bosses run on console, but like, you know, if emulator wasn't encouraged, if these types of things were encouraged, right? And that's why, again, I don't inherently want to shut down the idea of people being able to do runs with breaks and having that represented somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Because I do also think that can bring people into the community, and I think this person does as
For
well.
example, there's no runs of Hundo on the leaderboard. Maybe if there's a break-in, maybe people run Hundo, you know?
Yeah. It's all
Exactly.
digital right now. Although Clag is going to run on console eventually.
Yeah.
For that category.
I was just
But-
referring to console, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what
yeah.
you're saying though. No, absolutely, right? So I don't know where else to go with this. I think that's just kind of like it. All I ask is, again, please don't like try to figure out who we were talking about, or like
Yeah.
We were
try to
talking about
join
me,
this.
everyone.
If you want to join the Neopets community because the game sounds really cool, that's why you should join the community, right?
Yeah.
But like, don't go starting fights. Don't try to, you know, you can have your own opinion on this situation or Untimed breaks in general, and you're welcome to that. And honestly, if you want to like discuss or talk about your thoughts in the comments, feel free, right? Just
Absolutely.
don't keep it here and keep it civil.
Yeah.
That's all I ask. Because
If
again,
YouTube
yeah.
if YouTube dramas taught us anything, the worst thing that can happen to speed communities is people that like don't really have a stake in the game, like coming in and you know, like
Yeah.
muddying the waters, you know.
Because at the end of the day, this is our issue to sort out. If
Yes,
anything, this is
exactly.
kind of therapeutic for me to be able to vent about it.
Yeah, let's be very clear here,
Just another
like-
thing on Cosmic's note too. That's why I didn't say too much. Like, I know Jaxler says that I'm a part of the community, but let's be very clear. I played the game for 12 hours. I'm not really a part of the community, which is why I kind of said my statements and then I said, have fun with your guys' discussion. I'm not going to engage anymore because it's not my place to do that.
And this is why, like, in my examples, I've refrained from saying anything about Neopets specifically or making statements about, you know, like the people that are in this discussion.
Right.
Jaxler is my friend, and Jaxler has talked to me about this.
I'm sorry about that, by
You know,
the way.
over the last. No, you're awesome, dude. Much love.
sometimes.
But
on,
like,
on a good day.
you know, Jaxler has talked to me about this, and I'm mostly coming from the perspective of like seeing different varying degrees of this happen across speed games I've been involved in and not been involved in. And I'm just offering my insight as somebody that's had to moderate like a ton of different leaderboards. And whether or not I'm right or wrong, like that's kind of up for interpretation based on perspective. You know, it is at the end of the day a discussion. This is not like us trying to like hammer home like, no, fuck the brakes, you know, like that's not it.
Did you fuck my wife?
Did you fuck my brakes?
Did you fuck my brakes? Did you fuck? Did you take a break?
Did you take a break?
Did you take a break?
Did you take a break? Did you take a break? Did you
Yeah,
take a
but
break?
let's be very clear about that. Yeah, like it is at the end of the day, like we're arguing about, I don't know, like playing video games fast.
Yeah, we're literally
like,
playing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of where I'm at.
like,
But-
we're not saving starving children in Africa or anything like that.
No,
Let's,
yeah.
you know, we're not making this to be anything more than it is, but it matters to us, right? Because
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
is, you know, I tell people a lot that speedrunning is the most important thing to me in my entire life, right?
And that's
So
true.
it's like, that's why I get like this about it. That's why I won't.
I spend a significant amount of my waking hours that are not at work behind this computer, speedrunning games or routing games or stuff like that.
Messing
so like,
around, yeah.
and I think that like the sociological aspects of speedrunning now, especially that big boom happened from like 2020 to 2022 or 2023.
They call it the Big Bang.
These are topics that are pretty much unavoidable right now because of like speedrunning leaving some of this niche. I mean, it's shrinking back, I think, now to a niche sort of.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to managing communities and it comes to like all these people from different walks of life coming together for something competitive, you have to be prepared for these sorts of discussions. And a lot of it is like, some of it is just very complicated, you know? So that's pretty much all I got, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any last things to ask or do, Cole, or are you?
Are you just hanging on for dear life?
Not really. I mean, I feel like I'd be talking in circles a little bit. So
Hey, par for the course with this discussion in the Neopets server, but
Yeah.
I guess
said it.
all I would say, just as a blanket thing that, I mean, we've talked about before and we'll probably just talk about again in the future, is if you're speedrunning to get a world record or to even get a top time, then you might as well not even download Live Split because that's not the point.
yeah.
True.
That can be a point, but
You're
it
gonna have to
shouldn't
tell
be
that to,
the
like,
only point.
Wait until you see what 95% of the runs on SRC are, bro.
Yeah.
And like 95% of the reason some people run games.
Roblox. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this podcast, everyone. Super fun, not heavy discussion at all.
Yeah.
Just like super fun.
I promise next
lighthearted.
time it won't be like this. Well, actually, I can't promise anything.
The last
But-
few episodes have just been kind of heavy. I'm gonna be so real.
That's
Yeah.
true. We should talk about how big my dick is next time.
Yeah,
That'll be a
we
short
we
discussion.
we
We can do that.
Yeah, it'll be very short.
We're speedrunning a podcast
It is very
episode.
short. People have been saying it. Does anyone have anything
So- So by the time this podcast drops, I will have done I'm committing to this now because I got to wake up and do this tomorrow. I will have done a run of the entire base cast for Sengoku Basara 3 Samurai Heroes. So that is 6 character campaigns back to back. If you want a TLDR on what Sengoku Basara is, imagine if Dynasty Warriors had air combos like Devil May Cry, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of it, but it's going to probably be like a 3.5 hour run. So that'll be on my YouTube, if you want to check that out. It will be the first one of its kind.
Yippee!
Anyone
I'll
else?
be streaming this week, prepping for GDQ. The next time
yeah, I
you
should
see
probably do
me,
that too.
actually, I will not be in here, but I will be back up in name, like some of the earlier episodes from.
Wait, when is GDQ?
It's July 7th is when I leave. I want. No,
Okay.
yeah, no, it's July. I leave July. Wait.
It starts on. I mean, I'm getting there on the 5th.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm getting there on the 5th.
Yeah, I'm talking about the week, bro. Okay, so we have one more episode before GDQ, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
And then we're going to have our
it's
GDQ episode where me and Cole are not going to be on there because, again, we're poor. And so the 2 rich people are going to be going to GDQ.
The 2 people that got runs in.
Yeah. 2 rich people. People have been saying.
Okay.
Maybe next
Cole
time.
is still suffering, everyone. I'll do his shout out for him.
I have gotten to 99%. So.
He did get to
died
Measurement,
on
and he
boss.
did throw for content. And I
I was
just
gonna.
tough.
No, I
He snapped up. That's the most I've seen him move in a long time.
Finally see some movement in that way, but anyway.
The lateral movement.